Hey everybody, this is Largo, this is Lair, and welcome to Beasties and Baddies. Today we're going to go over something a little bit different, the anthropomorphic companions of some of our favorite characters in different genres. And to go over this and explore this with me, I have a special guest, someone you guys probably all know and love. It's my pleasure to introduce Brick Something. Hey
Hey
Brick.
everybody, how's it going? Good to see you all, and thank you so much, Largo, for having me on today.
I'm very pleased to have you here. Uh, we just started talking about some ideas for what we could do for a show. And, you know, there's a lot of different rabbit holes we could jump down, a lot of great
Mhm.
stuff. And trying to narrow that down, we're like, well, what can we do that's kind of something we can fit into a short, reasonable amount of time? And we kind of struck on this. So um, I see you've got some goodies up there. You want to show some stuff off to get us
I
started?
do. Just a kind of as you sort of see here, folks. I sort of I see myself as an aficionado of anthropomorphized animal action, and it's just funny. I start to look at my sort of like current modern 2.0 uh, action figure collection, and just sort of step back and realize, wow, there's a lot of like non-human fascinating, some anthropomorphized animals, others just sort of anthropomorphized trees and half horses and dragons, and so just to kind of like set the tone and give you a sense of where I'm coming from. Love these
Yeah.
toys, and I'm having a blast because I'm seeing more and more of these sort of like toy makers, whether it's the big ones or the small ones, really sort of embracing the monstrous or the bestial or the anthropomorphic. So yeah, I think it's great.
Very eclectic and groovy setup there. I'm especially digging the Ent and
Yep,
the
yep,
Mop
yep,
Watch. Those are very cool.
yep. I see your troll over there too. I've been
Oh
looking at your stuff,
yeah.
so
Oh, and shout out to
perfect for
Tron.
today.
He sent me a cartoon Martian Manhunter today. I picked that up, so very happy to add him to the collection. He doesn't
Ah,
quite fit with our theme today, but he is anthropomorphic.
yeah. No, I love the art direction from those cartoons in DC. So that
Yeah,
DC animation is amazing.
great stuff.
Fiendish
Oh,
toy talk, man. Let's do some fiendish toy talk.
indeed. Let's see what we got going here. So once again, our special guest is Brick Something, and we're going to go over some of our top picks. But first, we want to kind of get an idea of what are we talking about when we say this mouthful word anthropomorphic. So, basic definition from the dictionary: anthropomorphism involves non-human things displaying literal human traits and being capable of human behavior, whether that's my little teapot or a beast companion like what we're talking about today. So there's kind of a wide range. And what we're going to focus on today is the really cool anthropomorphic companions to some of our favorite heroes and villains. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you have the controls for the slides. Do you want to run through them, or do you want me to just switch them as we go?
Oh, I think, yeah, go for it.
Okay. All right. So I just brought up Grimace as a good example. Um, he's Ronald's good time pal, and he is definitely anthropomorphic. I'm not sure what he is other than a purple gumdrop. Uh, and we have a couple of examples here of how he was actually turned into an action figure. His debut in 1971, he was actually a bad guy. He and the Hamburger were snatching people's burgers and fries and shakes, and he actually had 4 arms to begin with. But when he converted to being a good guy, he suddenly only had 2 arms and was a little bit more friendly. So that's a example I thought I'd share with you guys. And
Amazing.
you know, he's just kind of fun. He's just a big purple happy guy. So the challenge we set for ourselves to narrow this down was each of us picked top 5 anthropomorphic companions that have also been made in toy form in one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
So that
Mm-hmm.
was a challenge. Rick, what did you come up with?
All right. First off, man, limiting it to 5 is such a challenge. So I will tell you what I was sort of thinking was like going through to sort of touchstones of my youth, my childhood, my adulthood. So first, definitely, I went to Ookla the Mock. For those of you that may not be familiar, this Ookla was from the Thundar the Barbarian cartoon that came out in 1980 when I was just a 4-year-old. And this sort of set the tone, I think, for me in terms of just loving a lot of the sort of sword and sorcery mixed in with a little bit of science fiction, you know, the sort of like masters of the universe of it all. And so, you know, you had this barbarian lead character who had this companion, and they both had horses, except for Thundar's horse was I didn't show a picture here, but Thundar's horse was just a horse, and Ukla's was this, I don't know, this mutated horse-like creature. And the mock, I don't know actually what a mock is. I don't know that they ever explained it. There were other mocks in the show, but honestly, it's been so long, I don't remember to what extent they explained him. But he was just this big sort of hulking character. It was 1980, so I'm pretty darn sure they'd watched a movie about 3 years prior and were like, what if we gave our hero a giant beastie creature who did not sort of speak in a language that was known to the audience, but instead was like growling and grunting and
Yeah, definitely reminiscent of another walking carpet type character that we all know and love.
Yep.
I've actually got a clip we could show Ookla in action if you like.
Yeah.
Let's check him out.
It's like fighting a mountain. The thing is too big.
Yeah.
He takes a licking and keeps on ticking.
Yep. And what you're seeing there is, again, there's the walking carpet of it all and the laser sword. Right. Yeah, it's a pretty fantastic show, and I love Ookla. The toy that you're seeing there is from a figure that was done in 2003 by Toynami. They did Ariel, Princess Ariel, who you also saw in that clip, and Thundar, I believe, is a 3-pack, or there was 3 of them. I don't know that they did any more. They might have done a villain. I forget. I wasn't around to buy I wasn't buying toy figures at that time. I was in my Lego. Yeah. Like you kind of have to, commit to that.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to pick up Thundar. I did not get his companions.
Okay.
And I'm pretty sure Toonami only did the 3. But they did some other cool cartoon properties. They did some Herculoids. I think they did Blue Falcon and Dynamite. I would love to see those guys come back and do those again with some modern articulation. But at least we finally got our mock in toy form after many years. I would love to have a kid.
I keep barking up every tree I can to hopefully get us some good Thundar figures that sort of would fall in line with Masterverse and Mythic Legions and even Super 7 Ultimate size, right? It'd be fantastic. And if you're going to do it, you got to give me an Ookla that's big in stature. So
that's right. You got to be beefy. And next, we went to from big to small. Went to
yes. I was a Saturday morning cartoon kid, but at a certain point, my dad came home one day, and I believe I was 6 or 7, with a bunch of comic books, and for whatever reason was like, all right, you guys are going to collect comic books. Okay. My brother was already sort of going to the corner store and picking up what he could from the 7-Eleven. And every time they go to the grocery store, Mom, give me this. So I landed, we kind of had to divide who's collecting what. And I ended up going with a lot of mainly X books, but a lot of Uncanny X-Men. And then eventually when X Factor came out and Excalibur came out. And so there was a period where this character that you see, this human character that you see in blue, Kitty Pryde, aka Shadow Cat, and actually, to tie it back, Ariel at one point. She was a young mutant who eventually, through their adventures, came across this dragon, essentially dragon creature from outer space. And so while the dragon Lockheed looks very sort of animalistic, he had very sort of like clearly a level of intelligence and sentience in the throughout different iterations of comic books that he was in. So much so that clearly he could communicate and with them, not necessarily by speaking English. He had his sort of own awesome, like squiggly line language. But I've always loved, like you said, big and small. This was her companion. This was sometimes when she was like in her zone. She herself was a super like STEM sciencey geek, as you see her here. And he was right there with her, just kind of like hanging out, you know? So I love that idea. And he went on adventures with the X-Men. He went on adventures with Excalibur. Could shoot flames. So really cool character. This is a figure that we got in the Hasbro Legends line. Not very articulated. I mean, he is really small. But I love the idea of a small dragon. Also reminds me of Figment from Epcot Center, if that's a thing that people are familiar with.
He was their mascot for a minute. He was cool too. Him and what's the other one I'm thinking of? Spyro the Dragon from the video game.
Yeah, that's right. Very like purple dragons. I don't know what the deal is.
He's very cool. He was definitely a very loyal companion, and went through quite a few. I seem to remember in the Chris Claremont runs of X-Men, he was featured a lot.
Yep.
And he was always surprising everybody because it's like he was easily underappreciated, or the villain kind of scoff at him, and then he'd come in and save the day, you know.
And you mentioned Claremont. That was like my prime time for me in terms of X collecting. That, and then later, anyways, the X Factor kind of era with the Simonsons. So anyways, comic. I'm a geek of many varieties.
Nothing wrong with that. Yeah, that's kind of my favorite flavor of X-Men too. I look at the ones I've collected from the Hasbro offerings over the years, and they all tend towards the Claremont era of the X-Men.
And real quick, I just want to say, so some of it's the animal thing. It's also the designs of these. I'm a very sort of visually driven person. And so with Ookla, very graphic, has a pedigree in Kirby, I believe, like as far as like a figure concepts and stuff. And King Kirby, right? Jack Kirby responsible for creating all sorts of characters, especially many of the ones that we know and love from both DC and Marvel, as well as Hanna-Barbera. So
had a hand in the early Masters of the Universe concepts. Also had his hands in, I think Command D was one of his, and there were a lot of anthropomorphic critters in that. Very similar.
And Masters of the Universe is something that's kind of like big with me, and so a lot of folks don't necessarily know that Mattel was actually working on developing one of Kirby's original series, the New Gods, right, with Darkseid and Caliban, etc., and Orion. And if you look at a lot of those early toys, you can totally see the influence, like the battle ram to me with its stickers of this sort of like demon head missile is totally straight out of Apocalypse, right?
Yep.
Spelled anyways, Apocalypse.
Yeah. From even all the tech, the stickers, the design is very Kirby-esque.
So design and the visuals matter to me. So again, when you have a dragon and you're like, we're gonna make it purple, and you put him next to this character who's like all in blue, there's just something about that really like I love. And same with Ookla, right? Anyways, and I'll come back to that a little bit more as we go through.
Good design is iconic, and they definitely fall into that very easily. And so, speaking of iconic, one of the best villains in the microverse.
Whew, man, I cannot go on and on enough about Micronauts, and I'll be doing a little bit more Micronauts talk on my channel relatively soon, because it's one of these toy lines that I think was super influential on a lot of the modern toys that we got and the toys of its era. Even you'll see there, This was based on the left side was actually a Marvel comic out of 1976, which was the year I was born. So you're probably like, what the heck do you know about Micronauts? Again, my brother's 5 years older. So I was born into a house that actually had some toys, and we had some uncles that were a little bit on the younger side, and they were collecting stuff and handing it down to my brother and I. We had this box, and to this day, he and I talk about it. We're like, where did that box of Micronauts toys come from? And my brother's real good. He has like real strong memories. He can tell you, oh, we bought this figure at Gemco. We bought this figure at Best Catalog. Like he could tell you, and he like remembers smells. It's fascinating. But there's this big mystery about where exactly did this box of Micronauts that we had come from? And it was a pretty good set, and it included Baron Karza. So that's the character you see there. As a child, I did not have Andromeda, and that's sort of the focus here today. So Andromeda is actually his sort of like horse companion, his steed, kinda, if you will, because you could, and I don't remember, I don't know that I showed it, or maybe I do have a slide. Let's see what. Okay, let's check it out. You can remove Baron Karza's body parts. They're all connected by magnets. Like, folks, magnets. It was so satisfying to pull that out and have it sucked back in with that magnetic force. And he had missiles for hands. Essentially, you'd press this button on the forearm and they would shoot out. But what you could do was take off his torso, and then Andromeda's body his head was connected to that little torso body by magnets that matched up perfectly, and you could create essentially this centaur. Biomechanical goodness. Like look at his armor. It's like couple parts medieval knight, couple part, it was like what was his name from Excalibur, an old 80s movie again, where I forget the villain, but in this gold armor that was very like knightish, but very sculpted. Yes. Mm-hmm. And if you just if you don't mind going back one, actually, if you take a look at that beautiful, I don't know if it was at Matlow, the art here just was.
Right. He's got like a chainmail helm behind his mask that really gives him a very menacing look. A lot of people have equated him with Darth Vader. It's like, no. This guy was his own entity, and his design actually had nothing to do with Darth Vader. It had everything to do with a Japanese character called Steel Jeeg.
Yep.
And the horse companion in that line was called Panzeroid. Mm-hmm. And it's basically a Japanese toy line from a short-lived Japanese giant robot cartoon. And the same thing. He had this Magna lock power where he could disassemble and reassemble and become one with his horse and become a centaur and do whatever.
Yeah.
So they just took that concept and put it right into the Micronauts line.
Yep. So you have to understand, folks that are maybe watching this and weren't of the era, there was a lot of toy reuse, right? There were companies who were going from the US, going around the world, particularly Japan, and kind of seeing like, hey, what do they got over there that we could get the rights to and create toys of here? And so they would do that. They'd see that toy that you mentioned, and we're like, okay, how could we sort of repurpose this? And the Micronauts line that we saw here actually came from I think multiple lines from Japan, and they kind of put them together. And then you're like, okay, well, what's the story? And they worked with Marvel Comics to kind of create this backstory. So I could go on, but just the idea of that horse, like I know I've talked a lot about Baron Karza, but it is about Andromeda. And if we go again to the next, like what I just love is this idea of combining them together.
Sadly, in the Marvel Comics, Andromeda was never seen as a separate character. Only when he would go into his centaur battle mode would you see the hints of Andromeda. But in the toy line, very cool toy.
Yeah.
And there's been a few, like Palisades and a couple of other companies that tried to bring this back, but it just never really hit on. And right now, we can only hope that at some point Hasbro will do something. I believe they have the license for Micronauts now. And maybe we'll see something down the line. We can hope.
Unfortunately, it's like there's the Micronauts, there's the Marvel Comics, and there's like some real like clear IP issues. But again, for those of you that might not be familiar, Quantumania is in theaters right now. Ant-Man is a big deal, and he goes into the quantum realm. Well, in the comics lore, the quantum realm is actually called the Microverse, which is where the Micronauts live. So I watched that movie hoping to see a little bit of a hint and a nod, a little bit more to some of the Micronauts. But anyway, love Andromeda.
Yeah, it's a cool stuff. I mean, we could do a whole rabbit hole just on the
Okay.
microverse, but another
Yep.
time.
Another time. Yeah.
So next we have one of my favorites and yours.
Yes, you mentioned earlier that Toynami had eventually done toys of, you mentioned Herculoids. This is the Herculoids. It was a cartoon that was around well before I was actually on the planet or conscious on the planet in the 1960s. So I was born in the 70s and grew up really
They played
deeply in
these
the
on
80s.
syndication and repeats on a
Yep.
lot of Saturdays. So like you, I caught them on the reruns. I have a
Yep.
clip. Would you like to see?
Yeah, please.
Let's check them out.
Somewhere out in space live the Herculoids. Zuck, the laser ray dragon. Igu, the giant rock ape. Tundro, the tremendous. Gloop and Bleep, the formless, fearless wonders. With Xandor, their leader. And his wife Tara and son Dorno. They team up to protect their planet from sinister invaders. All strong, all brave, all heroes. They're the Herculoids.
Oh my God, that was glorious. Thank you for that.
Those are so cool. I love watching those old cartoons. So much, science, fantasy. You can see the influences from this
Yes.
kind of stuff all the way through Masters of the Universe and many of the other
Absolutely.
franchises that we love now. They can tip their hat towards those guys in the 60s that were really putting some far out stuff out there.
Absolutely. That was such a great nostalgia hit. And so you're absolutely right. If you're wondering, like I showed you some of these like Beastie characters. So I do humans, and you're probably like getting a peek into the brain of Brick Something in terms of how he ended up collecting, because it's like, wait, what's with all these like people without shirts running around with space age weapons and swords and what's going on? And it's like, well, here you go. Is it any wonder, right? And I love these, and I want to shout out, the heads are both from Jose Luis More in Mexico, Hordak MX on IG. I've just, for whatever reason, felt the need to replace the Mattel heads. I wasn't super into them, but
Those are beautiful. Love those sculpts.
yeah, man, I love them too. And so again, laser swords, and
Oh
look
yeah.
at this guy. So there you have right there Xandor in front of the character that I wanted to talk about for this topic, and that's Tundro. I will tell you right now, I'm so tempted to cheat, Largo. It was like, can
You
the
want to put in a couple
Herculoids as a whole count?
Well, that's kind of why I showed the whole intro, because like they're all cool, man. They're all cool.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And as you saw from that clip, there's a whole team of these anthropomorphic and maybe some of them not so much, more animalistic still kind of creatures, but and you even got these sort of alien, the gloop, and so it's a whole team of them with a sort of a family, father, a mother, and a son. Is that right? It's just the three of them? Yeah.
Just the three of them, and then the extended family of all these critters
Yeah.
that kind of adopt them in their alien planet.
And if you could take a look at the design again, Alex Toth is the artist, illustrator, designer, comic genius. Like,
Also brought us Space Ghost, and I believe he
yes,
did some work on Batman later on too.
yep. He did the Space Ghost. All of these. It's not Hanna-Barbera. I always do this. Ruby Spears
Ruby Spears,
cartoons, right? So it was like Herculoids. Oh my gosh, you said Space Ghost. What's the Caveman?
I cannot remember his name,
I
but I know he's talking
always
about
blank on his name.
Caveman superhero. Before Captain Caveman, there was
No,
Anthony,
yeah.
something like that.
So many heroes, right? That they came up with, and he came up with, and that really kind of like ruled action adventure entertainment in the 60s and 70s. And like you said, set the tone for your Black Stars, your He-Mans,
I
right?
think we can see a little bit of a Johnny Quest flavor there
Yeah,
too. I don't know if
that's
he
Alex
worked on
Hoff. He
Quest,
did.
but very similar.
He absolutely did. Yeah, and then Shazam, not to be confused with Shazam, but Shazam, who was a more sort of genie character adventure thing. And I look back at all those and I'm just like, oh, I wish we had toys. So these in 2012, X Plus came out with them. They look great. Again, they came out at a time when I wasn't buying figures, and so I did look at them and the Thundar ones, and they're pretty pricey, and they're also they look amazing, as you can see. I think they really do like highlight the art direction of the original Entertainment. But they're
How
vinyl.
it's
Yeah.
very simplistic, but yet
Yeah.
very cool. And
Yeah.
definitely point across. Unfortunately,
Minimal.
like you say, secondary market, they're crazy prices
Yeah.
because they were a limited run, and
Yep.
now they're getting hard to find.
So folks, if you're watching this, definitely like this video, talk them up, because I'm on this quest to popularize as much as I can Micronauts, Herculoids, Thundar, until somebody says, "Oh, we might make a profit if we consider recreating these toys." That's what I want to see. But look at that Tundro. I mean, they're like rotocast vinyl figures,
Okay.
which is great, but they're very limited in terms of articulation. If they were on a shelf, it'd be great. I'd stare at them all the time. But I'd also love, again, to have them interacting with these sort of 7-inch characters.
Oh yeah.
Can you imagine having these big old beasts? And people are like, "Oh, that's a shelf killer." Yeah, I hear that all the time because they take up space. I was like, "No, man, that's
These would fit in so well with Mythic Legions or
yeah,
Blue Savage Crucible stuff coming out,
Yep.
even some of the Animal Warriors of the Kingdom. These would
Yes.
totally play with those guys, and I could see them sharing some shelf love. Not a problem.
Yeah, it's like Thundercats, right? Some people say they're shelf killers. I'm like, no, man, these would be like shelf all-stars or something. For me, it would be just like, yeah, cool. Let me throw them up there. Anyways.
Yeah, when I'm building a display, I'm always looking for a centerpiece, and somebody like Tundro, he's a centerpiece for any kind of a set.
And Tundro shoots, if you can see in that picture, he shoots these little fire rock magma things out of his horn. Just really cool stuff they were thinking about in the 60s, late 60s, right? Again, I think these are all things that lead to your Star Wars, right? Of course, Luke is super fascinated by the old serials that he grew up with, but this was the context that was happening at that time. And this is what the kids who would be watching this would be like teenagers, 13, 14, 15, going, in May to go check out this thing called Star Wars. And
oh yeah. I could definitely see where some of these may have had an influence on Mr. Lucas, or at least some of the guys at Industrial Light and Magic when they were coming up with stuff.
Absolutely.
It was iconic.
And all the fans who sucked it up.
Exactly. So next we come to another classic, and man, he's again beautiful design, great colors. He is, as you may know, actually based on a toy I remember from a kid, a line called Big Jim. Of course, I liked it. My first name's Jim. I'm like, cool. And one of the Big Jim accessory adventures had a cat. It was like a jungle adventure. And when Mattel was putting together Masters of the Universe, they wanted to bring in some sort of a steed for their hero. They had this hole and said, what can we do with this? And so they decided, let's go crazy. Let's go green with some groovy orangish yellow stripes and see what happens. And we got Cringer and Battle Cat.
Groovy is the perfect adjective, man. Absolutely. I think if you look at that, you're like, wait, Christmas? But like, no, man, this is just, I love the color theory. It's just pop, especially when you're going to know that you're going to have, this flesh tone, this peachish character on top of him. It's super smart, and the sort of, again, the signaling of and differentiating of them versus you've got your Skeletor and eventually Panthro, right? There's this contrast. And again, I couldn't just, well, actually before that, you're mentioning the toy. The Big Jim was a larger figure. It was a 12-inch, yeah?
He
Roughly
was
12-inch.
8-inch, roughly. He
Oh,
was
okay.
in between, but yeah.
So then you've had Masters of the Universe that were planned at sort of at 5 inches, and so there was this. It was amazing. Like these stories, it was like accidental creativity, if you will, because the person who was sculpting was like, nah, like we're doing this. Well, actually, it went back to how can we do this on the cheap? What tools exist? Right. And there's like, well, we do have this big tiger. And the person was like, perfect, let's do that. And the designer's like, no, man, it's just not going to work. It's way too big. It's out of scale. And they did. And the guy was like, exactly, that's it. As a fantasy, right? Yeah, it doesn't have to be in scale. Give me a giant tiger and make it green while you're at it. And give me this like dragon inspired roly-poly pill bug, armor and this helm that is just incredibly dramatic, and we don't really see his face underneath there. I don't in any of these shots. But then you have the original concept art from 81. Beautiful. That's Mark Taylor, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
I almost encouraged that fight.
So many different people who worked on
totally.
Yeah.
And then we've got Battle Cat, the vintage toy, non-articulated figure, just an awesome sculpt, and the original Big Jim sculpt with some cool paint deco and a new sculpt of armor there. Right. And then if we go to the next one, he evolved, right? So the year later, what people don't realize is that when we got Masters of the Universe toys when they first came out in the early 80s, we didn't have a Prince Adam. We didn't have a Cringer, right? We just had toys that had mini comics that told us a story, very different story than what eventually became the Filmation cartoon. In the Filmation cartoon, he truly became anthropomorphic, right? In fact, he could talk. Oh,
want to see?
Love it.
Check him out.
By the power of Grayskull.
Easy, Cringer. It's me, Adam. What happened to Cringer?
You will find he will be very important to you in the future. You may call him Cringer, but he is not entirely what he seems to you just now.
Well, you're certainly not a Cringer anymore. All right, big cat. Let's go.
Oh my God, so good.
So it's just perfect stuff coming together. Filmation took the toy line and ran with it. And they made a few changes here and there, but for the most part, they did some great work. But like you say, the color, the art just really popped with what they did with the animation. They really took Battle Cat, who was just kind of a generic steed, and they made him a really cool character. And they came up with the Cringer concept and the idea that, well, if Adam changes, maybe Cringer does too. So very good stuff.
Yeah, and then you see again the toys. So that sort of, there was a time when there was actually no active Masters of the Universe in production. And when Masters of the Universe Classics came out in 2008, I believe, eventually Battle Cat came on the scene, and that's what you see here. Much more articulated, sculpted by the Four Horsemen, who handle Mythic and Cosmic Legions and a bunch of other toylands that you might be familiar with. But just super detailed, great, re-envisioning of sort of this character without that. I mean, not really re-envisioning, sort of like updating, but it really is fairly true to the original toy.
They gave him some articulation, but they kept all the things that made him classic. But when it comes to reimagining, I think our next slide, we start going into some of that.
Absolutely. So before that toy that I showed you there, a couple years before, they did try to earnestly bring back Masters of the Universe for the generation of people then through Mike the Young Productions cartoon. Fans refer to it sometimes as the 2000X series. This is in the early aughts, and you see him there. They really were like, okay, let's play into the saber tooth of it all, the saber tooth tiger kind of armor going on. You see it's totally different, a little bit more sort of like of a spacey vibe with the claw attachments. And that's the toy that we came up with. That was actually that was a Four Horsemen sculpted toy at the time. So
The
very
articulate-
different.
Little limited. I love the story. The cartoon was really
Oh,
good.
so good. Uh-huh.
I liked some of the updates. I liked the way they took the story direction. Yeah, the toys were kind of lackluster. I wish they'd had more of an opportunity to develop that. If we'd got these in the origin style, man, that would have been a home run.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think yeah, but it was interesting just to sort of them see to see them try to translate this thing 20 years later, and what they were kind of looking at the time, because of what was a little more popular, was a little bit more of the manga anime inspired stuff, definitely things coming out of sort of Image Comics the decade prior. And I think it was all kind of coming into this almost like a more is more vibe, right? We
Yeah.
went from the sort of stripped down barbarian, now it's like, what can we throw on here? Let's throw on guns and missiles. And it was definitely of its time.
Definitely a manga flavor. Now that you mention it, I could definitely see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was good for what it was. And then another reimagining has come, and it
Yes.
got some mixed reviews. I didn't think it was terrible. A lot of people, were not crazy about the way it was advertised, but the story wasn't bad. It was a good story. The art and the animation is beautiful, and the Masterverse toys I'm in love with. I've got all of the core characters in Masterverse. I love the articulation. I love the scale, and the Battle Cat is really nice.
I will stump hard for Revelation. I really enjoyed Revelation. I totally get why it threw some people off, but I don't know. So it's really hard to sort of gauge. Really, it's just hard to assess how well loved is it or not without seeing numbers, and we don't have numbers. But I do know there's people who are really upset and were real loud about it, and they have platforms from which so. That aside, I loved it. And I will tell you right now that what you're seeing right here is responsible for what's over here on this table. In that this is if you remember, right around lockdown times, and a lot of us were indoors because of what was happening in the world, and the sort of sadness, extreme sadness and fear that was happening across the world, right? And so just being careful to name it, because I don't know, I've heard different people say certain concerns around YouTube and stuff. So hopefully you're getting what I'm saying.
It's the coup. That's what I call it.
Okay. So at the time, right, we were all locked indoors, and then there were these announcements that like, hey, Masters of the Universe was coming back. In fact, a couple years prior, it was like Origins, and we were like, oh my gosh, it reminds me totally of my childhood in this format, but like highly articulated, and you can pop and swap these figures. Awesome. And then they're like, yeah, but there's more. 7-inch. And I was like, ooh, because frankly, that just the way I lean, it's like I did grow up with vintage Masters of the Universe. Love it. And I think Origins is an amazing line, and not only like captures that flavor, but like improved on it by adding the articulation and the pop and swap of, all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
But in Revelation, it was kind of like, okay, cool. We're getting at least Mattel's best attempt at doing a more adult collector line that shoots for the standards of the higher articulation, a little bit more detail in the sculpts, right? And so that's the Battle Cat. And I love this Battle Cat. I take issue when you take his helmet off a little bit, but I, unlike a lot of people, like the kind of bird-like direction, still leans more on the classic side than, say, 2000X with the extra stuff.
Right. I think they kind of tried to give you, kind of a Cringer-esque head if you take his helmet off.
Yep.
And
Yep.
It's like, it's okay.
Right. Yeah,
but
it's all right.
It's like Battle Cat should be Battle Cat. Give me a separate Cringer that's a little bit smaller, Prince Adam, and I'm a happy camper. Maybe we'll get that.
And that figure I think is amazing, and especially when it went on sale and it's still out there, like you could get a great four-legged beast, and there are people who make great customs out of it, as well as even custom parts. I've seen people make them into wolves. So yeah, there's heads that people sell and offer, or you can even get the STL file and print it yourself. But there's just some real great things out there, and I have bought some on clearance, and I took that saddle and put it on a Hammond collection T-Rex, and that's
Oh,
what my
nice.
King Grayskull sits on. So it's just a great toy. I'm in love with it, and part of the Masterverse line, and I dig it. But there's more.
Indeed.
And so then we went into the CGI show of it all, and they again talk about manga anime influence, as well as sort of like a new school graffiti sort of vibe in terms of the
Yeah.
scaling and the
I
exaggeration.
I gotta say, I was very pleasantly surprised when I heard this announced. I kind of rolled my eyes. I'm like, oh, okay. But I watched it, and it was
Mhm.
like, what? The story is good.
Yes.
The
Yeah.
animation style is good. It's a different take,
Yep.
but it's like if you don't expect it to be what you saw as Filmation, and you're giving it a chance to be its own entity, something new,
Yeah.
it's really good.
Yeah.
I'm impressed with it.
And we could talk Masters of the Universe a lot, but I will just say, when the Filmation thing, which I know a lot of people love, came out, you got to understand that there was a mini comic story before that people were into, and people shifted and were open to it. Okay, mini comics, great. Oh, Filmation, great. All I'm asking is do the same with maybe 2000X. Be open to the fact that this thing can have a life beyond what we knew at a certain time and can grow and evolve. And if you think about what they've been able to do, they haven't been able to do it as successfully and at the scale that, say, the MCU has, by re-envisioning these characters, right? But they've successfully created multiple universes and takes of their characters. And now we're seeing a little bit more of that in this notion of the Masterverse, and in the Masterverse comics, and we have New Eternia. And I really love that. Think about the freedom that creates for the
It's a
life of this line.
Yeah, like what we had with DC back in the day before the crisis. You
Mhm.
had multiple Earths. You had
Yep.
ways to tell stories and have different flavors on characters. And the Masterverse is doing the same thing. You can have multiple He-Mans from multiple different Eternias, and they can all coexist and work together. And it's a cool concept. I like it.
Yeah. And thank you for allowing me to do this noble cheat, because I was like, wasn't going to do it for the Hercules, but I was like, well, let me get 5 toys out of one character.
It works. It's
Okay.
Cringer. You gotta
And
love
here we
Cringer.
go. This is the last one, I believe. Okay.
Yeah, for Cringer. But all of them are quite excellent.
Whew. It really is an amazing time to be a Masters of the Universe fan. And I hope we get to that, what I just shared, that level of positivity and celebration of the brand. That's where I want to go, folks. Let's stop the and the being upset about not my He-Man. What you just be happy that people care, and that you have like 4 different options of toys right now. Actually, more coming.
How
More
great is
if I count the bricks, right? Like the Mega Blocks, right?
Mega
So
Bloks,
many
yeah.
toy line options for this one brand that you all are supposedly fans of. So celebrate them. Check this out. Mondo, huge scale. I can't even begin to go down this avenue, but I appreciate it so much. I lust for it by just looking at this stuff. And in the center there, yeah, you've got the armorless Battle Cat and the little baby Cringer. Just really cool things that came out of this. And you see a very more classic-ish Masters of the sort of like a truer to the original vintage on the far left.
Yeah.
But then on the right, Mondo's like, yeah, we like that old stuff. Can we try our
Our new take? Yeah, it's like
can we
hold my
try our take on it?
do a little tweaking here.
Yep. Hold
They
it.
do 1/6 scale, and they are phenomenally detailed.
Yeah.
The advantages of the 1/6, of course, is you can do more detail. You can do better articulation, and you can do accessories in much more detail than you can even in the 1/12 scale, which is kind of where I live. If I had the money and the shelf space, I'd be all over these, but they're a little pricey, and
Yeah.
they definitely require a room of their own, I think. But
Here's
this
the
this Ranger Battle Cat set is a great example. It's a good value for what they're pricing it because you, like you said, you do get Cringer as a separate character figure. Then you have the Battle Cat plus two different sets of armor. I mean, you can't go wrong.
Yeah, and you can see the posability and sort of that middle thing, and yeah, this is really just fascinating, and to sort of see this character kind of be able to have multiple versions and iterations is fantastic. So again, anthropomorphic animals and characters and steeds and companions, but yeah, to me, I had to throw in the Masters of the Universe, and hopefully y'all can see a through line in those.
Absolutely. And whoops, wrong button. That button. There we go. There we are.
Hope that wasn't too long, Largo, but I get excited.
Yeah, this show's going to go a little longer than usual, but that's okay because we're covering some great stuff. These are fun picks. I enjoyed every one of the ones that you chose. Um, and we're definitely on the same page as far as our love for things anthropomorphic, companion styles, what has a cool factor, has a good design factor, and it's just a cool character. So we're running on all cylinders. Now we're gonna take a look at some of the ones I picked, which are probably going to be in the same wheelhouse. So I got to start with the classic.
I got to work on my Wookiee, my Shirawook.
He is the OG. In 1977, he blew all our minds, and we're like, "Who's this Sasquatch-looking guy?" I'm digging it. And then 78, we got, and that was one of my first Star Wars toys. Was, Han and Chewie. That goofy bubble-headed Han that came out with the first set. They eventually gave us a better Han down the road. But Chewie was Chewie. He didn't change much in the Kenner line. He pretty much, unfortunately, didn't have head articulation because they wanted to sculpt the fur. But it was a fun toy, and he is definitely the quintessential anthropomorphic companion. He is, his loyal buddy, and he's got an attitude, and he's not going to let anybody mess with him. And I'm digging that.
I love that you said Han.
Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I grew up, as I said, I was born into a house that I know, I guess I was 2 when I was born into the house that, at least when I sort of became a little bit more conscious, like say 3 or 4, where Star Wars was just a thing, and my brother had pushed to get those toys. And I remember that figure and just being so obsessed with it, especially that weapon, his bow.
Yep.
Even though it didn't sort of have the front piece, but the way it sort of, you had it and it had a clip over his arm, was just, for whatever reason, fascinating to me, and it migrated to my GI Joes.
Oh yeah, he could definitely be a Sasquatch companion, or if you weren't into the Wookiee aspect of it. But what a cool guy to have on your team. And eventually,
Very cool.
He does evolve. We've seen in his original setup, and then over the years, Star Wars kind of fell out of favor, and then we got the power of the Force, and that was so awesome. Everybody was, very beefy, and the first ones were very stylized and very cartoony, but they were fun,
Yep.
and I liked it when the line came back. So we see there an example of Chewie in 1995 when he came back. He's kind of upper torso kind of beefy, and then they course corrected and they went more photo realistic with some of the later ones, and then the Black Series came out not too many years after that, and then we started getting the 6-inch scale, which is the one I have, and this was the one that was based on his Empire look, which is a little bit more shaggy, a little bit more disheveled, but he had the proper bowcaster, and great toy. I love that one.
He
There's
looked
been
fantastic.
a lot of Japanese imports that do Chewy and doing well. And then I just kind of threw in for fun a little Calvin and Hobbes nod there. I love that Han and Chewie hanging out kind of look. Just
Very cool.
just fits the flavor of the characters. You know, they were buddies. So
Yeah,
Chewie
which is
was my
great if you're familiar with that his work with the Calvin and Hobbes. It's great to think about Chewie and Han's relationship in
yeah,
relation to Calvin and Hobbes. It's great. And
kind of a
that Black
fun.
Series sculpt, whew, I got to
It's
give it to him, man. Hasbro does
for
some great work.
yeah, furry characters in plastic do not translate well, and they did a good job. And he
Mhm.
still has articulation, which is impressive. So moving on from our favorite furry guy to another furry guy. You know, this is a little bit more old school, but he is uh, he is definitely one of my favorite anthropomorphic companions. This is Muttley the Magnificent, as he calls himself. Um, he's definitely uh, he's definitely a bad guy, but he's funny. He doesn't always do things like he should. He's not always working for the best interest of his pal Dick Dastardly there, but they do make a good combo. And of course, you know that laugh. Everybody knows that.
That's what I
Love
was
that.
trying to mimic. Yeah, that's great.
And so he's been through a couple iterations. He started out with the Wacky Races, and they had their Zoomer Mobile. What did they call that thing?
I don't
I can't remember. Monster. It had a name, but it escapes me at the moment. But it was a cool ride, and they would always cheat to try to win, and they had all kinds of crazy gadgets. And then later on, they went to more of a World War One style, where they were chasing a carrier pigeon, trying to snatch a message from the pigeon, and hijinks did ensue.
And
So
again, this was the 60s, yeah?
yeah,
Or was this already 70s? Because so again,
I
if
think
you're
they
not
started in the '60s and then kind of went into the '70s. And
yeah, because
they
if you're
showed up
not
in a lot of
familiar with
movies.
this era,
Yeah.
that this cartoon in particular, the Wacky Racers, was actually so this is all Hanna-Barbera, and Hanna-Barbera had like a universe of their own of a bunch of different characters, and a lot of them all ended up in this very unique show where they're basically part of like a what do you call it? Like I remember the movie Cannonball Run back in the day, like this
Yeah, it's
race.
very similar.
Or,
It was a race around the world, and they called it the
yep,
Wacky Race. Everybody had a cool car, and the
yep,
cars had different gimmicks. They had cavemen in their car, and they had the anthill
yep,
mob that had their kind of gangster mobile. And oh,
yep,
what was the pretty girl? Penelope Pitstop had her little pink racer, and then there was like the super handsome dude who had like the cool dragster. And yeah, it was all
yep.
fun. But these two
I
were
love it.
the ones who stole the show because
Yep.
they're the baddies. Everybody's you kind of want to root for them, but you know you shouldn't because they're not supposed to win. But you know, I
Mhm.
was rooting for
And very much like Chewbacca, right? Chewbacca has so much personality in his grunts, and sort of like you get a personality from him, the way that was acted, and same with Muttley, like so naughty and like sneaky, and just like it's
them. Oh
fantastic.
yeah,
You see it even from the drawing there, right?
yeah. He didn't actually speak, but
Mm-mm.
he kind of did. He had a kind of a Scooby-esque style, which is fitting because we learned that Don Messick, who did the voice for Scooby Doo, also did Muttley's voice.
Ah,
And so a lot of the mannerisms and the rag'em frag'em kind of stuff he gave to him was very much that same style. Muttley did not get a lot of toy love. He showed up. There's a Wacky Racers game, which is still available, by the way, if you're interested. Comes with the little cars, and Muttley is in, of course, Dick Dastardly's vehicle. And there's been some models of the Wacky Racer. And, oh, it's called the Mean Machine. That's right. I couldn't remember the name. So you
that's
can get a Mean
gorgeous.
Machine with Dick and Muttley hanging out there. But it wasn't until the recent movie Scoob that we started
That's
seeing some
right.
love. I love this movie, and it was so underrated.
I did
Um,
too. And my kids, at the time, I think they would have been 8 and 10, loved it. And they wanted to kind of check out a bunch of Scooby-Doo stuff. And oddly, they weren't as taken with the other stuff, but there was something about this movie that really struck them.
so many great Easter eggs. I love the Blue
Mhm,
Falcon. I love Dino
mhm,
Mutt. I love the
mhm,
fact that they brought in Captain Caveman.
mhm.
They tried to give it kind of a new and updated twist. It's a good story, and this could have been the beginning of a Hanna-Barbera verse. Just like with the MCU, it's like we could have brought in some cool stuff and gone somewhere. It just didn't do well at the box office, and that kind of killed the
Yeah.
franchise, which is unfortunate. But Muttley again stole the show.
Yep.
I don't know. You remember? You've probably seen this with the kids. You know the storyline. You know,
Yep.
Dick Dastardly is, of course, the great villain in this, and he's seeking some treasure of some sort, and there's some mysticism involved. And he almost ends up offing himself accidentally, and Muttley sacrifices himself to save his human companion, and almost drew a tear. But at the last minute, Muttley gets saved, and Scooby helps bring Muttley back from the abyss. And you find out old Dick Dastardly really does love Muttley, even though they're both really rotten. They love each other. So I like it.
And that design for that character, how they brought it into the sort of 3D realm, it's just so great. Both of them, they look
Yeah.
fantastic.
A little updated style, but all the classic elements are there. And
Mhm.
really, it works in CGI. It really does. So we finally got some Muttley love. So with this movie, we got a line of Scoob
Look
toys.
at that.
And
That's awesome.
this was a European special that had Dick Dastardly and Muttley together in a 2-pack. In the States, we got, they were kind of mixed up. So if you wanted Muttley, you bought him with Blue Falcon. If you wanted Dynamite, you bought him with a different set. They basically packaged them so that you had to buy the whole set if you wanted to get all the characters that you wanted. And it was like cheeky, good marketing. And I have this guy upstairs somewhere. I wasn't able to grab him. I wanted to put him on camera, but
How big are these?
this is kind of 5 to 6 inch scale ish. So they kind of fit with your 6 inch 1/12 scale. They're slightly undersized, but they're anthropomorphic cartoons, so they can still generate. Very limited articulation, basically just his arms and his head. But he's got that look. He's got that rasm kind of growl, kind of evil grin going. So he's a cool guy. He hangs out on my desk upstairs most of the time. So those are my first couple of picks. And then,
Random tangent. Sorry,
Mhm.
I'm just curious. You said box office. When did the movie come? Wasn't it during lockdown?
It did. It actually came out
Yeah, so
in 2020.
yeah.
It actually it
Yep.
did it actually hit theaters,
No,
or did it just
that's
go
why.
directly to?
I'm pretty sure it went directly to HBO Max, which is
Okay,
why I think we were able to watch it with the kids.
right.
Because we were looking for things, and that was a time when they were just releasing things as streaming. So I think that
I
that's
bought
such
it
a
on
shame.
Blu-ray,
What a shame.
so it did come out in physical media, but I just
Mhm.
assumed at some point it came out in theaters. But you're right, the theaters weren't open, so it
What a
just went.
shame.
Yeah,
So watch it,
maybe
folks.
or maybe they'll try again. But it's good. Yeah, it's definitely worth a watch. Whether you watch it on your favorite streaming or you get the Blu-ray, it's worth it. It's fun. It's fun. And so from there over to the more heroic side, got to have me some Gleek.
Mhm.
Let's see Gleek in action here with his human companion.
Sand and Jaina with their space monkey, Gleek. Dedicated to truth, justice, and peace for all mankind.
What's sad is that we don't hear his sort of chatter. Like, it's the coolest thing. I can't even do it justice, but I
I
love
was
the way
trying to
Gleek
find a
did it.
clip with just Gleek, and it's hard to find.
It's hard.
So,
Yeah.
again, another one of those Hanna-Barbera designs that really worked. They wanted to update the Super Friends for that 77 season, so we got the new Super Friends hour, and
Yep.
he actually premiered in the Super Friends comic book, which came out just before the cartoon did, and
Okay.
along with the Wonder Twins. So they decided to update the sidekicks, give them superpowers, and of course, Wonder Dog went away, and we got Gleek the Space Monkey instead. He had a lot of style, had the elastic tail, got himself in a lot of trouble here and there, but he's a fun character. And again, very, very much in the anthropomorphic style. He's very intelligent. He obviously could communicate his own chatter, and it works. So he's a fun one.
I don't know what was going on with like color language or whatever, but it strikes me now this sort of like little companion of the purpley, like again Lockheed, and like I don't know what's going on with that, but yeah, I really that I th- yeah, this was probably my first real connection to DC as a kid, right? I was
Yeah,
really
for-
tiny.
before I
Yeah.
could read comics, I was watching Super Friends, and that of
Yep.
course led me to want to read comics.
Yep.
So,
And
I like the
so
fact that his uniform is reversed from the Wonder Twins. So, they're wearing the
Mhm.
purple with the yellow highlights. He's yellow
Yep.
with purple highlights, and it's like,
Yep.
yeah. And so
Such a
the toy I
trip.
have here is from a 8-inch Mego style. This was Figures Toy Company, and they put out the Wonder Twins and Glee, and so that was pretty good.
Do you know like
Definitely,
when that was?
just a few years ago. I want
Okay.
to say around 2002. I'm not
Okay.
exactly sure, but it was fairly recent, and I believe they're still available. Um, Figures Toy and Mego are both currently working with the DC license and still putting out
Mhm.
stuff. So if you're into that scale and that flavor, he's got a nice cloth suit. He's got his adjustable tail there, and it's pretty cool. And we did get another version of him.
Yeah.
This, whoops, uh, this is the one that I enjoy because I collected the Mattel DC Universe classics, and so I've got the Justice League. Then I've also got my sideline of Super Friends version, and uh, unfortunately, he was only a San Diego Comic Con
Mhm.
exclusive. So if you bought the Wonder Twins and you were at the San Diego Comic Con, you had the option to get Galik there. So he's very rare, he's very expensive, and he's a great one to have in the collection if you can get him. But be prepared to spend a little. To hit, but just a cool character, and he's you know the stretchable tail, the antics he gets himself up to, and somehow he just always magically had a bucket when Van needed to turn into form of
Form of
water.
water.
Like, where'd the bucket come from? Like, I don't know. Gleek had it.
I love it. He communicates through the use of sign language, acting out scenes, and chattering in an unintelligible alien tongue. I loved his sort of chatter. It was fantastic. And it's funny you say or you got this in here of the acting out scenes. I remember that sort of like trying to communicate what's happening.
Oh
This
yeah.
is
Sometimes
great.
he'd
It's great.
use his tail to kind of form images and kind
Uh-huh.
of give people ideas. They really personalized and gave
Yeah.
a cool character to him. So some people found the Wonder Twins and Gleek annoying.
Yeah.
I found them endearing. So and they did eventually make their way into the mainstay of DC Comics. Even
Mhm.
got their own comic book for a minute.
Yep.
A lot of different places they showed up.
Love
So
it.
again, sideline characters that kind of out of left field. I loved Super Mario World, and
Mhm.
one of the things I enjoyed in that was Yoshi. Very anthropomorphic. He hits best of both worlds. He's dinosaur and he's anthropomorphic companion. How do you go wrong? You know.
Yep. Agreed.
And he started as this little pixelated dude and eventually evolved into the character that we all kind of know and love him now. He even got a spot in a short-lived cartoon. And I have a clip, so we'll take a look.
Super Mario, Super Mario World.
Super Mario World, it's a blast from the past. In Super Mario World, you got to move fast. Mario and Luigi are doing what they can. Yoshi and the princess are giving them a hand.
Super Mario World.
Super Mario World, it's a blast from the past. In Super Mario World, it's a blast.
That's
Do you
awesome.
remember that cartoon?
I remember it. I do because I love the Captain N cartoon a little bit more, which was it was sort of back to back with or packaged together with,
Right.
and that was like I was big into Nintendo at the time, the NES, the original NES, and it was sort of like this kid who gets sucked into the world and his weapon is actually the controller.
Right.
And then you would watch Super Mario Brothers, which was cool, but I always kind of wanted to see them crossover because in Captain N he was
Oh yeah.
hanging out with Simon Belmont from Castlevania and not Samus, but Samus Aran wasn't there, but they fought Mother Brain and Metroid. So
Right. There was it was like this explosion of video inspired cartoons for a minute, and
Yep.
it was very cool. We got a lot of neat stuff that
That's
didn't
right.
stick around long, but they were trying new things, and Captain N was another one that was really cool. I'm trying to
Mega
remember.
Man was in there too.
Mega Man, yeah. But I always had a soft spot for Yoshi, still do. Jack Specific has been doing some really cool stuff. They're doing 2-inch and 4-inch, and of course, with the new Super Mario movie coming out, Yoshi's going to show up. It'll be cool to see how they interpret him in the new CGI. So
I'm
I'm
definitely partial to this, the newer version. So that's the original, I think, Super Nintendo.
mhm.
I love how they redesigned him a little bit and made him a little bit more sort of cute and kawaii, right? Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, and you can kind of see that in the toy image. It's a little bit more uh, animated style as he's evolved, and
hmm
as the game uh, technology has evolved. So
yep.
yeah, he's a good one.
Good pick.
And
Good pick.
thanks. So with the next one, I kind of had to cheat a little. I'm a lover of Hobbs, not this Hobbs. I just want to be clear, not this Hobbs. This Hobbs.
Yeah.
Now, this is a cheat because as part of the challenge, we said it had to be in toy form. And there's a reason why we don't have any Calvin and Hobbes
Yeah.
toys. And it has
Yeah.
a lot to do with the creator, Bill Watterson. Beautiful artist, but he had a very strong stand. And I'll read his quote here. Oh, well, actually, a quote from an article about him. While Bill Watterson's Calvin and Hobbes comic strip has become one of the most beloved series of all time, the artist and writer passed on potentially making hundreds of millions of dollars through merchandising for one reason. He thought the comic strip should stand on its own. And as a result, Watterson rejected an estimated considerable amount of money to
You
get
really
it
did.
to keep the integrity of the popular and acclaimed character intact. And that's a quote from a Screen Rant article. And I can respect his integrity, but it sucks as a fan because I want a toy. So it's like I get where he's coming from. He's like, hey, I'm an artist, I'm doing a comic strip. I don't want to see this on all kinds of merchandise because it waters down what the character's supposed to be. And of course, there's a point to that. But, fans will find a way. So I have a couple of examples. One I thought Brick would especially appreciate is the Brick art.
Yep.
People love what they love, and they love Calvin and Hobbes. So people have done brick art. People have done 3D modeling. You can find STL files and print and paint your own Calvin and Hobbes if you wish. So I found a couple of examples. So technically, sort of, kind of does exist out there in toy form, just not officially. The closest we have is this one. There is a company called Attaboy, and they made this Regent the Tiger. It's a plush 17-inch stuffed animal, and it bears a striking resemblance to Hobbes in his standard toy form when he's not being magically animated by Calvin's imagination. So if you want this, it's available. I found it on Amazon, and you can get it right now. So
Interesting, huh? Interesting. It's close. Like I could kind of see them making an argument that it's not, because the dimensions of the head, but it is really close.
yeah, it's as close as we're ever going to get because of Watterson's wishes. But
Right.
I couldn't not include Hobbes because when you're talking about anthropomorphic companions,
Yeah.
he's one of the best. I mean, he is literally, a child's plaything brought to life by imagination, and so anthropomorphic it hurts. So,
Yeah, I didn't, want to mention it when you were showing the Chewbacca because I was like, is that legit? And so was it? Do you know? He didn't have any hand in that, right? That Han Solo Chewbacca.
No, I believe that
Yeah.
was a
Okay,
knockoff,
that's what
of
I
sorts,
thought.
but it's in
Yeah.
his style. But
Right.
I saw that and it kind of got the spark. I'm like,
Sure.
yeah. So
That was
those
great.
those are my picks. And again, we're kind of on the same page when it comes to this stuff. I asked you to put together a group, and I put together a group, and all the picks were definitely in our same kind of feels.
Yeah.
It was fun. I
No,
enjoyed doing it.
absolutely. Especially all those hits of the clips and everything. Man, that took me on like just such a wonderful, like such a strong nostalgia hit, man. I was like, oh, yay. Fantastic. Thank you for that. Appreciate that.
Well, thank you, and again, thank you for your time. Thank you for hanging out and doing this with us.
Anytime,
And
man.
more to come. I'm going to be doing some other shows of this ilk. If you have the time and we come up with another concept, let's do it again.
Love
You
it,
know,
man. I
put our
would
heads
love it.
together, figure out what else
And
we can dive into.
that'd be great. And I'd love to have you over on Brick Something too. Just let's figure something out and let's, I love the fact that people are getting together and we can just sort of enjoy what it comes down to is our love for geeky things, right?
Absolutely.
Cartoons, comics, toys, like let's do it. And I really loved, especially like just sort of hearing you talk about Scoob and some of these newer things too, these newer versions, right? Because it's like we don't really get to, like, yes, we love this stuff in the past, but how are these things playing out now? And I don't necessarily have a whole, you get to talk to people about some of those geeky things because, like, who saw Scoob? But there you go.
And that's a great thing about our community is if I don't know about something, one of the other guys probably do.
Yeah.
And we all kind of help each other to keep up on current events, what's new in toys, what's new in other pop culture stuff. And sometimes other guys are into stuff maybe it doesn't trip my trigger. It's not my thing, but I can appreciate that they have a love for it, and
Yeah.
vice versa. I'm sure there's stuff in my collection people are like, not my thing,
Yeah.
but it's good. So
Yeah.
this is definitely the idea here is to explore some stuff maybe doesn't get as much love as it should. Sometimes the monsters get overlooked for the heroes, and it's like, hey man, the villains, the Beasties, the Baddies, if they weren't there, you wouldn't have a story. You got to
Yep.
have a good antagonist. You got to
Yep.
have some cool characters to throw in the mix. So we'll see what else we explore in the near future. And again, thank you, Brick Something, for your time and for just being a cool dude.
Oh, thanks, man. Thank you. I had a blast. Yeah, and I gravitate to other cool dudes. So, especially ones that can give me back a love for Micronauts, Thundar, Herculoids, and it's like, and we could talk X-Men, Scooby
Oh,
Doo, Wacky Racers. Like, yes,
It's
hang
all
out,
good.
geek out,
Cool.
man.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for coming, and enjoy whatever you collect. And we'll see you in the near future.
That's what's up.